to the region's only public safety talk show. It's time again for the Sheriff's Report, your weekly report from Spokane County Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. Sheriff's Report covers a variety of public issues in Spokane County and is now in its fourth year on the air. Sheriff's Report is sponsored by River Ridge Hardware. Now, here's your host, Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich.
Well, good morning. This is Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich with the Sheriff's Report. Been a while since we've had a new program on the air, and I thought I'd bring in one of, in my opinion, better representatives of the area, Representative Mike Volz. With you're in the 6th, Position 1, correct?
6th District, Position 1.
All right, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Mike saw in the last session. Quite frankly, folks, there are some things that happened in the last session that were pretty much disgraceful, in my opinion. And I hope that after the show, if you agreed with that point, you'll be contacting some of your local representatives and letting them know that these type of actions can't happen again. And with that, Mike, how did the last session go?
Well, the last session was particularly frustrating, and I left Olympia. I was pretty upset about how things went. There seemed to be a lot of chaos, especially at the end. As you know, it was a 105-day session, budget year, and a lot of work to be done. There were certain things that I thought would have been handled immediately, such as finishing up the funding on special education. That was delayed till the very end. I would say the last 80 or so hours, which were grueling, we were on the floor at 20 hours out of whack, trying to finish up the people's business in the last 80 hours, so we'd get 4 or 5 hours break and then back on the floor. We were seeing title-only bills, and there's actually, I think, court cases going on right now where a bill did not exist in substance at 10 in the morning, and they would fill in the blanks. They would bring forth a title-only bill in committee. They would fill in the blanks on it, and these were massive tax bill, one in particular. And then we were expected to vote it off the floor, which they did within 20 or so hours. So the bill didn't exist. There was no time for public hearing or public comment, and it just got literally rammed through the House of Representatives and through the Senate in a very short order without any time to have the public input or stakeholder input or the normal discussion or even a thorough study of the economic impact of what those bills would do.
So just for the folks that are listening, and let me get this straight. In the last few hours of session, they just put a title out there, fill in the blanks, you're supposed to vote on it. We get no input. How's that legal?
Well, that's the question on whether or not it's legal. In my personal understanding and opinion is it's not legal, that there's supposed to be a time period where those bills are out there in substance, and when the people, stakeholders, other legislators get a chance to read it, look at it, and then make an informed decision and add some commentary, look at the final impact, and that was not done, which is why it's in the court. But once it's in the court, coin flip on which way it goes, but it's not legal, shouldn't be legal. I know there's a lot of bills being drafted right now to further clarify that it's not legal, and whether it's legal or not, that falls in the category. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, and they shouldn't do it. And I would believe that if the Republicans were in charge, we would never do that, and that's a pretty firm commitment from our entire caucus. Even we would not let our leadership do that to us. We would not let our leadership do that to the people of Washington State. So very, very clear and very committed on that personally, and I think as a caucus, it's a very solid point for us.
It's almost as if that's sort of like a blank check. Is that where all of these tax initiatives happened that we ended up having to vote on this last fall and give our opinion because there's nothing we can do about it? It just happened?
Yeah, if you know, when I looked at my ballot, I don't think I've ever seen that before. I went to it was in the far right column, and there was billions of dollars of those advisory votes. And I think the people, not only in Spokane County in the 6th district, but Washington State as a whole gave a resounding not no, but heck no on those massive tax increases.
But there's nothing we can do about that now, right?
There's nothing. Well, there's the initiative process, and there is something you can do. Elections matter. We you know, as House Republicans, for example, we went from 48 members to 41 members, and at 48 members, even though we're still in a minority by a couple votes, we still have a lot more influence with 48 members than we do with 41, and we have a bigger voice in the crafting of these bills, because they will need our help even when we're in the minority, when we're a couple votes in the minority. When we're in a big minority, they don't need us, and then they made that clear. And one of my big frustrations is, you know, if you have in the House who has 57-41, the Democrats won an election. Elections have consequences, but it's still not 100%. You do not represent 100% of people's views and opinion, and it shouldn't be, you know, a large majority should not be viewed as unanimous consent. And so there needs to be, I think, some deference and respect for the minority view and the minority party and the people of the state. And that's what was really frustrating is the people of the state made it very, very clear on what they thought of those tax increases. We had, what did we went from 44 billion to 52 billion in a budget year. So there was about a 20% increase. I think it was 18.5%. About half of that was from normal economic growth. So we had a very strong economy. We went in there with a big, you know, we have $5 billion-ish growth in the budget, lots of money to fund, lots of stuff, and maybe even, heaven forbid, put some money away for when the economy goes south, which we didn't do. And then on top of that, they lay on, you know, more taxes. And, you know, B&O taxes, we taxed medical services, we taxed pharmaceutical, we taxed, you name it, we taxed it. And it's going to create lots of problems out there, and it already has. People are struggling even how to comply with some of these new taxes and these new regulations. So,
with that in mind, we see time and time again the initiative process. Mm-hmm. So they pass all this extra taxation, more money, but at the same time, we go to wipe out the car tabs, and that has significant effect on a lot of different aspects. I don't think people actually realize how much that impacts law enforcement when you have those vehicle tabs go down like that. I think that what I saw was, and I heard was, well, if they're going to lay all these taxes on us that we didn't even get a word in edgewise, we're just going to take this tax away. How are you guys going to balance that out now that a lot of these road projects, critical road projects, may or may not get done?
Yeah, and you've obviously heard the same thing that I heard, is that people were absolutely inflamed on the tax increases, and they were going to vote yes on the car tab reduction, and they were voting no on all of those advisory votes on those massive tax increases. And it's you know, akin to maybe a smaller version of a Tea Party revolution that we saw in this last election. But it was very clear, you know, in terms of transportation, I think the you know, $30, it's a nice number, it's easy to talk about, but there needs to be a funding source for these projects. And I don't have the full number off the top of my head on what that left in the hole. And this isn't luxury projects. This is maintenance. This is kind of the bedrock of what needs to be done in the transportation. And you're right on the public safety part of it is these roads get, you know, and they impact law enforcement as they do anybody else. And some of these projects we're talking about, they're looking at actually closing some of the bridges in rural Washington, which limits access. So there's a variety of things that we need to fund, and so we need to come up with a mechanism to pay for those. And it would be nice to say that let's make the Department of Transportation more efficient, and et cetera. But neither you or I run the Department of Transportation. Maybe we would do a better job, maybe not. But in reality, we have to take care of these road projects. We have to take care of these maintenance projects. Like I said, it's the bedrock, bread and butter type of project. So it's not luxury, nice to have stuff. So that's a big challenge I think that we're going to face in this upcoming session, is how to get stable funding. And then the problem is, when you think you have stable funding, what they do is they end up sweeping the money out of these different pots and nooks and crannies to put into the big black hole of the general fund. So
I know in public safety arena, we see this often. The state 911 funds, we build up a reserve so we can start working on preparing for next gen 911. The state comes in, sweeps those funds,
Yep.
leaves us broke, and we're sitting there trying to struggle and try to figure out, how do we deal with the 911 issues that we're facing currently? On top of that, the new FirstNet projects, which there's a lot of people at the local and state level that do not understand the magnitude of that effort and what it can bring to the citizens as far as safety and security, and there's no funding for that.
Well, I think from there's I try to separate the state and the local decision making and the policy, but at the state level, we need to just flat out stop sweeping those special funds. We just need to stop doing that. That's I'll give you an example in this last session that there's it's called the MODCA fund. It's for a toxic cleanup, and that money builds up and they sweep it every single year. Well, this year they raised the tax for the MODCA fund, and then they swept it anyway. So you raise the tax because there's a crisis, because you have these environmental projects that haven't been cleaned up, and yet you still sweep the money. And that's the same thing they do. There's a whole list of these special purpose funds that the taxpayers believe are set up for a specific purpose. So I think from the state level, whether it's 911, whether it's the environment, that these funds should be held in trust, and they should be used for their intended purpose, period. And not this shifting, where's the P, where's the what shell is the P under, and sweeping it into the general fund to spend any way they want. So I think that's rule number one. And then locally, the infrastructure on 911, which is greatly improved over the years. I think locally we've invested a lot of money in improving that, and it makes a big difference when I get reverse 911 texts when I'm sitting at home about somebody in the general vicinity doing bad things. Well, that's a great thing to know when I'm sitting at home in my family, that there's a threat in my area. So I think those improvements have been tremendous, and I think the local investment has been substantial. And with your work, we got Shrek up and running, and I think a much stronger proactive presence in that space. So, but the state needs to be a good partner in that, and if there's funds promised, they need to keep their promise and keep those funds in place.
The one thing that I find that I think sometimes the state forgets is that at the county level, especially, not so much the city, municipality level, but at the county level, we are an actual extension of the state government. We are doing state business, and when you hear about people sweeping funds in that, you're actually sweeping state funds, because those state funds that come to us at the county level are used here locally, true, but they're to deal with the statewide mandates and issues, and many times we get unfunded mandates from the state to deal with. Let's talk about 1639 a little, because I can tell you that I had an extreme amount of people call me when that initiative passed last year, and surprisingly, more Democrats than Republicans called me, and they were angry that it was passed, because contrary to what they were told in their campaign of, oh, this is school safety. No, this was banning hunting rifles. A lot of angry people, a lot of angry Democrats, and between the way that they did the tax increases, this new gun laws, do you think that the Democratic majority are looking and going, I think we've really overstepped the line on some of this stuff. Maybe we need to dial it back and as you said, pay attention to what the citizens of this state are talking about, both Republican and Democrats, because there's a repeal effort now to get rid of 1639. What was it like for you on that type of issue?
Well, as you know, I'm very pro Second Amendment, actually pro all the constitutional rights, and I think the Second Amendment is clear. The Washington State Constitution is clear, and I think that one was, you're correct, particularly misleading on what the intended purpose was. I mean, we've offered up, if school safety is the issue, we've offered up bills and amendments that I think for $60 million would put school safety school safety officers in the school. I personally like your plan of the school marshals, which is a little bit different and a little bit more cost effective, where you can get kind of a bigger bang for your buck, still under professional supervision and training, but you can get a little bit better exposure and more resources in the school. So it has nothing to do with banning XYZ guns in general. And so I think there was a lot of frustration on that, and I think not only the infringement on rights, but also the view that it was kind of misleading on the pro campaign on that, talked about and it was really something else. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most county sheriffs and law enforcement opposed the bill.
We did.
Across the state, and that should say something. It resonated with me when you had bipartisan across the state opposition to that, because you understand what it means trying to enforce that. And I think in a lot of regards it's unenforceable. At least in the current state of law enforcement, you're not going to go kicking down doors and see who has what locked up. That's not going to happen. And so
that would be against the Constitution.
It would be. Yeah.
And the worst part is this has been written in such a way that it is truly unconstitutional. Supreme Court made it very clear in Heller, you can't tell people how to store their firearms. You have a right to own a firearm for self-defense, and making you either break it apart or lock it away. They said, no, that's not readily accessible for your self-defense. Our Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, has sent me 2 letters, both conflicting, because in one, Mr. Ferguson says, there's nothing in 1639 that tells you how you have to store your guns. So on this show, I put that out. Yeah. I got a letter next week going, oh, wait, no, that's not exactly. And I went, well, okay, which one is it? Because you're correct, Bob. The law that you wrote, and Bob Ferguson wrote that law, ladies and gentlemen. You need to remember that. Mr. Ferguson wrote that law. He knows that the reason part of that law says nothing in this says how to store your guns, because he knows that it violated, anything different violates Heller.
Right.
But in another section, it says safe storage as defined is locked away. So he wrote this law to appease the extreme anti-gun advocate, but at the same time, he set this law up to be unconstitutional, because even though it says one in one category, it tells you a different thing, and it's all double speak. Yeah. Again, Mike, do you think that the majority, and I refuse to call them Democrats anymore, this majority is led by socialists, pure and simple. Do you think they're listening at all? Or do you think going into this next session, you see a repeat?
Well, I can't speak for the majority. I can't speak for them. I do know that there are a number of them in both houses that are on our side on a number of issues, and there are still pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment, pro-Constitution Democrats over there. Whether or not they're given a voice anymore, because it is dominated by the I-5 Seattle to
Socialist. Let's just call it what it is, Mike. It is socialism.
I have to go work with these people and being polite, but certainly a different view than I would say historic Democrats. I know you were brought up in a Democrat household, as was I, and I think that some of the views today are far different than what you and I would recognize as the traditional.
You can't even
Democrat.
recognize it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of any old school Democrat that would do what they did to law enforcement in this last session.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had a deputy in this state shot and killed. And for the first time in the history of this state, the Democrats refused to do a resolution and sponsoring a moment of silence for that deputy on the floor. The first time in the history of the state. You were there.
Yeah.
Can you give people a little bit of insight on that? Because I can tell you that sent shockwaves through the law enforcement world of just how disrespectful these socialists have become, and they are anti-law enforcement. They don't like us, to the point of, I was told by one of your seatmates that, Sheriff, they consider your death just a casualty of war in their social justice war. You're just collateral damage.
Yeah, I don't have firsthand knowledge of that commentary, but I will tell you, I was rather appalled. We have active law enforcement in our caucus who serve across the state in various capacities in law enforcement. It was normal tradition to have that moment of silence. We were stunned. We have ex-law enforcement. The closest I came, I was an MP in the Army and realized it was not my life calling. But it was shocking, and it was speechless at the moment. But I want everyone to understand there was a moment of silence. There was proper respect given. It just happened behind closed doors in the Republican caucus room, where we did show that respect. And how it wasn't allowed out on the floor is just it's beyond the scope. I can't comprehend why they wouldn't take a few moments to do that. We spent more time on license plates and the debates on license plates than having a moment of silence for a fallen officer who are out there protecting us.
And I've been given some excuses, and that's all it says is an excuse. From their side, they went, well, we knew the pastor was going to mention the fallen officer. That's not the same as the state House of Representatives drafting a resolution honoring this fallen deputy. And this fallen deputy was shot and killed by an illegal alien. And I find it even more interesting, given that we are a sanctuary state. Mm-hmm. Mike, any thoughts on that issue? How do we unravel that one? Because it's true, that is another truly unconstitutional act that this state has done. The Supremacy Clause of the Constitution of the United States means something, and we have people in this country illegally that are committing crimes, horrific crimes, and we're not allowed to tell ICE or Border Patrol that they're about ready to be released from our jail on bond so they can be picked up and deported because they are here illegally and they have committed horrific crimes here. How do we unravel that?
That's a tough one. It is. I don't understand how that ever happened in the first place. When I first started hearing about sanctuary cities, it's do we get to pick and choose which laws we follow? Do we want an IRS sanctuary city? I mean, so to be able to pick and choose on that, especially when we're talking about these criminals, and even amongst the illegal immigrant community, let's be clear, it's a very, very small percentage of them, but that very small percentage of people commit a horrific number of crimes. They totally distort any underlying crime statistic for that ethnic group or population, but to not be able to take action against a known criminal, whether they're here illegally or legally, is just appalling, and it has led to deaths across the country, not just in Washington State, not just the law enforcement officer, but across this country. I think the organization is called Angel Moms.
Yes.
If you don't know about Angel Moms, go Google Angel Moms and read about some of their stories. And it's appalling to just, hands off, can't do it. So I don't know what the answer is. It's certainly not going to change under the current regime, if you will. But it needs to.
In 1 minute.
1 minute.
Because that's all we have. Next year, what's the big thing that you need or you want to see done next year?
Well, I think with 51 Republicans in the House and a minority in the Senate and a Democrat in the governor, I don't think anything that I would want to run through would probably pass. I am running a bill that, and you and I have talked about, the 23% penalty and interest that we charge on delinquent taxpayers. Years ago, you were supportive of the partial payment. I think you're supportive of this. It's been a while since we've talked, but if you're late on your taxes, we charge you 23% penalty and interest, and I think that's wrong. And so we're working on a way, and have been working, predates my time in the House of Representatives on trying to get that policy changed. So that's one of the big ones that I'm working on. Hopefully we get over there and we just remind the Democrats that they don't speak for all of us, and that they should pay attention to what the citizens are saying on taxes and these other issues.
I wish you luck going over there. Yeah, it's actually an election year next year for you, so we'll have you back on to talk about that. And thank you for the work that you do. You are one of the best representatives in this area, and I appreciate the work that you do. The things I watched last year were just amazing. And the other aspect is when a representative from the nation of Israel comes to Olympia and they refuse to recognize or do a resolution for them also, and the Republicans have to do it on their own. Right. This is how extremists become over there, and that's what's killing our nation. We have to get rid of the extremes, folks. We have to go back to doing the right thing. So with that in mind, this is Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Sheriff's Report is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksMedia.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Sheriff's Report is sponsored by River Ridge Hardware. Ask Ozzie a question, recommend a guest, or hear this program again on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SpokaneTalksMedia.com.
Hi, this is Larry at River Ridge Hardware. Just wanted the opportunity to show you a little bit about our Christmas. We have Christmas tree stands. We have ornaments that you won't find anywhere else. We have the small Christmas lights. We have the tube lights that you can run up and down. We also have a massive amount of snow shovels. Come on out and visit River Ridge Hardware.